There's this weird phase of building wealth that nobody really warns you about. You're doing the right things, you're saving, you're investing, you're making smarter decisions than you were a couple years ago. But when you check your bank account, it still doesn't feel like much. You look around and everyone else seems to be doing better. Nicer apartments, newer cars, vacations you can't justify yet. And you start wondering if maybe you're just fooling yourself. You're not. And I'm going to show you 12 signs that you're actually on track to be wealthy within the next 5 years, even if your bank balance hasn't caught up with your habits yet. Because the truth is, wealth doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly in the background while you're too busy doing the work to notice. My name is Ivan, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human psychology, and why some people seem to glide through financial challenges while others are constantly stressed about their bank account balance. If you've ever wondered whether the small decisions you're making today are actually going to pay off down the road, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps clarify things for you. Here's what I've noticed about people who end up wealthy within a few years. It's almost never the people who look rich right now. It's the ones doing boring, invisible things that nobody posts about on social media. And if you recognize even 4 or 5 of these 12 signs in your own life, you're closer than you think. Number 1, you've stopped comparing yourself to others. This one comes first because it might be the most important psychological shift that separates people who build wealth from people who stay stuck. When you're broke or feel broke, comparison is constant. Your coworker just bought a new car. Your college roommate posted photos from Santorini. Your neighbor has a bigger house. And every single one of those observations creates a tiny pull towards spending money you shouldn't spend on things you don't actually need. But something changes when you're on the wealth building path. You stop caring what other people are doing with their money. Not because you're bitter, but because you've started to realize that visible wealth is usually either debt funded or coming at the cost of someone's future security. Rich Richard sees his buddy pull up in a $60,000 truck and thinks, oh, hope that makes him happy. Zero envy, zero second guessing. He knows his $15,000 used Toyota and his growing investment portfolio are the smarter play for where he wants to be in 5 years. Poor Peter sees the same truck and immediately starts browsing dealerships. He finances a $50,000 vehicle at 7% interest. 2 years later, he's upside down on the loan and stressed about payments every single month. When you stop comparing, you stop making financial decisions based on other people's choices. You build according to your own plan, your own timeline, your own values. And that makes you immune to 3 forces that keep the majority of people broke: marketing, peer pressure, and fear of missing out. If you've reached that point, even partially, that's a serious wealth signal. Number 2, you feel rich in time, not just money. Here's something that separates the people who will be wealthy in 5 years from the ones who will still be grinding with nothing to show for it. The future wealthy have started valuing time over things. They've stopped glorifying being busy. They crave space, slowness, and control over their schedule more than they crave a new watch or a bigger apartment. When your finances are tight, you have no choice but to trade every available hour for money. You clock in, you hustle, you say yes to everything. But as your financial foundation strengthens, even slightly, something shifts. You realize money can buy time back. Time to think, time to rest, time to be with the people you care about, time to work on something that actually excites you. No, Rich Richard pays someone $150 a month to clean his apartment. That buys him about 3 hours he spends with his kids or working on a side project he actually enjoys. He says no to meetings that don't serve him. His calendar has white space in it on purpose. Poor Peter does everything himself to save money. He spends Saturday cleaning, Sunday running errands. His calendar is packed from morning to night. He feels productive and important, but he's exhausted and never has time for the things that will actually move his life forward. You start paying for convenience instead of hunting for the cheapest option on everything. You say no more often. You protect your mornings or your evenings or whatever hours matter most to you. These are quiet upgrades that don't show up on anyone's social media feed, but they're signs of someone whose relationship with money has fundamentally matured. Number 3, you've created a financial buffer and you don't talk about it. You're not living paycheck to paycheck anymore, but you're also not bragging about it. While other people flex their lifestyles online, you've quietly built something that actually matters. Breathing room. You have money sitting in a savings account that you don't need to touch. An emergency fund, a cushion, cash that gives you time, peace of mind, and options when life throws something unexpected at you. You don't panic when your car breaks down. You don't dread the end of the month when bills come due. And if your job disappeared tomorrow, you wouldn't crumble. You'd be concerned, sure, but you'd handle it calmly because you built a runway before you ever needed one. Rich Richard has $20,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. When his laptop dies, he buys a replacement without pulling up his bank app first. When his company announces layoffs, he's alert but not terrified. He has 6 months of breathing room and he knows it. Poor Peter has somewhere between $14 and $100 in checking and about $300 in savings. Every unexpected expense is a crisis. The car repair goes on a credit card. The medical bill gets ignored until it goes to collections. Here's the thing about financial buffers. They're invisible to everyone except you. Nobody knows you have $20,000 in savings just by looking at you. But that invisible cushion changes how you make every single decision. You negotiate harder at work because you're not desperate. You walk away from bad deals because you can afford to. You sleep better. And if you have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up right now, you're already in the top 25% of Americans. That's not nothing. Number 4, money isn't the main topic of your life anymore. When you're broke, money dominates your thoughts. Every decision feels like a financial calculation. Lunch, rent, gas, a friend's birthday dinner. The mental math is exhausting and it never stops. But something interesting happens when you start building real wealth quietly. Money stops being the main character in your daily life. You've built systems, you've automated your savings, you've handled the fundamentals well enough that you don't need to constantly think about them anymore. Your finances run on something closer to autopilot. Rich Richard doesn't obsess over credit card rewards points or which grocery store has the best deal on chicken breast this week. His money runs on autopilot, automatic contributions to his brokerage account, automated bill pay, a diversified portfolio he rebalances maybe once a year. His mental energy is freed up for bigger questions. How can I spend more time doing work that matters? What kind of life am I actually building here? What do I want the next 5 years to look like? Poor Peter still talks about money constantly. He's always researching the next deal, the next side hustle, the next opportunity. But because he has no system, everything requires his constant attention and decision-making energy. He's mentally exhausted from managing money poorly instead of building his money to manage itself. This shift, from financial survival mode to financial background noise, is one of the clearest signs you've leveled up. If money is starting to feel boring in your life, if you're not constantly stressed about it, that's actually a great sign. Boring money tends to lead to an exciting life. Number 5, you think in terms of long-term gains, not quick wins. The people who chase instant gratification with money almost never end up wealthy. The next bonus, the next tax refund, the next hot stock tip from a guy at work. If that's how you think about building wealth, you're going to be disappointed over and over again. But if you've started thinking in decades instead of days, if compound growth excites you more than overnight success stories, you're operating on a completely different wavelength than the average person. Rich Richard invests $500 a month into index funds and doesn't check his account every week. When the market drops 15%, he doesn't panic. He keeps contributing. He's been doing this for years and he understands that the boring, consistent approach is what actually works. Over 20 years, his $120,000 in contributions turns into roughly $350,000. That's the math of patience. Poor Peter jumps from opportunity to opportunity. Day trading for a few months, then crypto, then a dropshipping course, then something else. He never stays with anything long enough to benefit from compounding. 20 years later, he has maybe $60,000 saved and a long list of lessons learned the hard way. If you've stopped looking for shortcuts and started trusting the process, even when it feels painfully slow, you're thinking like someone who will be wealthy. Not eventually. Within 5 years. Number 6, you've stopped making excuses and started taking ownership. This is a big one, and it's going to be uncomfortable for some people. When you're on the path to building real wealth, something fundamental changes in how you talk about money. You stop blaming external circumstances for your financial situation and start taking full ownership of it. You don't say, I can't afford that anymore. You say, that's not a priority for me right now. The words sound similar, but the psychology behind them is completely different. One frames you as powerless, the other puts you back in the driver's seat. A Rich Richard makes $65,000 a year in a high cost of living city. Instead of complaining about rent prices or tax rates, he optimizes what he can actually control. He lives with a roommate to cut housing costs. He bikes to work a few days a week to save on gas and parking. He meal preps on Sundays. When friends ask why he doesn't upgrade his lifestyle, he doesn't get defensive about it. He's clear about his priorities. He's building his investment portfolio first, and the nicer apartment can wait. Poor Peter makes the same $65,000 and spends his energy explaining why saving is impossible. Rent is too expensive. Student loans are crushing him. He deserves to enjoy his money after working hard all week. And here's the thing, he's not wrong about the challenges. The cost of living is genuinely tough, as a student debt is real, but he's using those challenges as reasons to avoid action instead of constraints to work within. 5 years later, Rich Richard has $85,000 invested. Poor Peter has $4,000 and a lot of stories about why it's not his fault. Ownership doesn't mean pretending everything is easy. It means choosing to work with what you have instead of waiting for conditions to be perfect. Number 7, you're earning more without feeling the urge to spend more. Something interesting happens when you're quietly building wealth. Your income goes up, maybe from a raise, a promotion, a better job, but your daily life looks roughly the same. You got that 15 or 20% bump, and instead of upgrading your apartment, or leasing a new car, you barely notice the difference in your spending. So, the extra money just quietly moved into savings or investments. This is lifestyle inflation immunity, and it's one of the strongest predictors of who actually builds wealth over time versus who just earns more and spends more in an endless loop. Rich Richard made $60,000 at age 28 and lived on about $45,000. He got promoted to $80,000 at 32, but his lifestyle only crept up to about $48,000. That extra $32,000 a year goes straight into investments. By age 40, he's sitting on $280,000 in accumulated wealth. Poor Peter's income also went from $60,000 to $80,000, but now he has a $2,200 apartment instead of $1,400, a car payment instead of a paid-off sedan, a gym membership he barely uses but feels like he should have at this income level. By 40, he has $35,000 saved. He feels successful because his lifestyle upgraded, but financially, he's barely ahead of where he started. When you get a raise and your first thought isn't, what can I buy now, but how much more can I invest this month? You've made a psychological shift that separates you from the vast majority of earners. That instinct alone is worth more than the raise itself. Number 8, you've mastered living below your means, and I don't mean you're eating rice and beans every night or depriving yourself of everything enjoyable. I mean you've built a life where your spending is intentional and naturally sits below what you earn. You don't feel the constant pressure to impress people. Kwaki, you figured out what actually makes you happy versus what marketing tells you should make you happy. And it turns out those are very different things. Rich Richard makes $75,000 a year and spends about $55,000. That $20,000 gap every single year, that's not deprivation. That's options. That gap is the reason he can save, invest, take calculated risk, and say no to opportunities that don't align with where he's going. Poor Peter makes the same $75,000 and spends $80,000. Every raise gets absorbed by a slightly bigger apartment, a slightly nicer car, slightly more expensive dinners. He looks successful from the outside but feels broke on the inside. That margin between what you earn and what you spend is the single most important number in your financial life. If that gap exists and it's growing, even slowly, you're building the foundation for everything else on this list. Wealth starts in the gap. Track your spending for 1 month. Calculate the difference between what comes in and what goes out. If the number is positive and trending upward, you're doing better than you think. Number 9, you invest before you feel ready. Here's a pattern I've seen over and over with people who end up wealthy within a few years. They don't wait until they feel financially comfortable to start investing. They start before it feels safe. They start before they fully understand every detail of how the stock market works. They start while they still have debt, while their emergency fund isn't quite where they want it, while everything still feels a little tight. And that willingness to begin before the conditions are perfect is what separates them from the person who says they'll start investing when things settle down. Things never settle down. There's always another expense, another reason to wait, another excuse to push it back another year. Rich Richard opened a brokerage account with $200 when he was 25. He barely knew what an index fund was, but he set up automatic contributions of $100 a month and just let it run. By 28, he understood more about investing than people who had been reading about it for years but never actually started. Poor Peter has been planning to invest seriously for 3 years. He's watched dozens of YouTube videos about portfolio allocation. He knows the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, but he still hasn't opened an account because he's waiting until he has enough to make it worthwhile. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people's wealth potential dies quietly. Number 10, you've built at least one income stream outside your job. This doesn't mean you need to be running a 6-figure side business. It could be freelance work that brings in a few $100s a month. It could be rental income from a property. It could be dividend payments from investments you've been building over time. It could even be something as simple as selling things you create online. The point isn't the amount. The point is that you've broken the dependency on a single paycheck. When 100% of your income comes from one employer, you're one bad meeting away from financial crisis. But when you have even a small stream of money coming in from somewhere else, your psychology changes, you negotiate differently at work, you make career decisions from a position of curiosity instead of desperation, you sleep a little better knowing that if something went wrong at your job tomorrow, your entire income wouldn't vanish overnight. Rich Richard started a small freelance consulting gig on the side. It brings in about $800 a month. That money goes directly into his investment account. More importantly, it taught him that his skills have value outside of his 9 to 5. That realization alone changed how he thought about his career. Poor Peter puts all his financial eggs in one basket. His job is his only source of income, and that means every workplace frustration feels magnified because he can't afford to lose it. He stays in situations he should leave because he has no safety net. Even a small second income stream, compounded over 5 years, creates both financial and psychological leverage that a single salary never can. Number 11, you surround yourself with people who think about money differently. Take a look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. Are they saving and investing? Are they building something? Or are they spending every dollar they earn and complaining about being broke? This isn't about judging your friends. It's about recognizing that your financial behavior is heavily influenced by the people in your proximity. If everyone around you is financing new cars and taking trips they can't afford, that behavior starts to feel normal. You absorb it without realizing it. But if you've started gravitating toward people who talk about investing, who share financial goals openly, who get excited about compound interest instead of the latest sneaker drop, your baseline has shifted. Richard joined an online community of people focused on financial independence. He has 2 close friends who also invest consistently. They don't talk about money all of the time, but when they do, the conversation is about building, not spending. That environment reinforces his habits without him even trying. Poor Peter's friend group has a different culture around money. Friday night means going out and spending $200. Suggesting a cheaper alternative gets you labeled as cheap. The social pressure to spend is constant and exhausting. You don't need to replace your entire social circle overnight. But if you've noticed yourself seeking out conversations about building wealth, if you found even 1 or 2 people who think about money the way you want to think about it, you've changed your trajectory. Environment shapes behavior, and behavior over 5 years determines wealth. Number 12, you've started saying no to things that used to tempt you. This last one is subtle, but it might be the most telling sign of all. You've developed the ability to walk away from purchases, experiences, and opportunities that would have hooked you a year or 2 ago. The flash sale doesn't pull you in anymore. The limited edition drop doesn't create urgency. On the everyone's going, you should come too, trip doesn't override your financial plan. And this isn't about being miserable or denying yourself joy. It's about having developed the muscle of delayed gratification to the point where it doesn't even feel like sacrifice anymore. It just feels like clarity. You know what you want long term, and the short term temptation simply doesn't register the way it used to. Richard gets invited on a weekend trip that would cost about $1,500. He thinks about it for a minute and decides it doesn't align with his current priorities. He's not upset about it. He doesn't feel like he's missing out. He just knows that $1,500 invested now will be worth a lot more than a weekend. He won't remember in 6 months. Poor Peter gets the same invitation and says yes immediately. He puts it on a credit card and figures he'll deal with it later. 3 months from now, he's still paying it off and can barely remember what they did. The ability to say no isn't just self-discipline. It's a sign that your identity has shifted. You're no longer someone who spends to feel good in the moment. You're someone who builds to feel secure for years to come. That internal shift is worth more than any single investment you'll ever make. And once it clicks, it doesn't go away. If you recognize even a handful of these 12 signs in your own life, you need to understand something. You're not just getting by. You're not just surviving. You're quietly building something that most people will never have the patience or discipline to create. The fact that it doesn't feel dramatic, that there's no confetti or celebration, that's actually the proof it's working. Wealth built on consistency and quiet, boring decisions is the kind that lasts. So keep going. Even if it doesn't feel like much right now, 5 years from now, you'll look back and realize this was when everything started to change quietly, exactly how it's supposed to.